Good morning, everyone. We appreciate your time and attention. Why are you here today? Companies attend these types of things to gain information on how they can reduce their operating costs, how they can mitigate risk, or how you can improve customer satisfaction. You do that by establishing effective document-driven business processes. Now, we're in the document-driven business process business, and that's how we've made our mark. But before you can establish those effective processes, you need some process intelligence. You need to have a holistic view of what's going on inside your organization. From task to task, from start to finish, revealing all the problem areas that you see in these document-driven processes. And only then can you do something to solve them. And that's what AltaSoft does. It gives you that insight. In fact, the product's called Insight, into the holistic view of your document-driven processes. Now, having said that, I'll turn it over to the experts, Matt and Andrew.
Thank you, Cass. It was a perfect introduction, actually. But I'd like to step back and just talk a little bit about AltaSoft, give you a high-level introduction to AltaSoft, where we came from. We'll do a little bit of an overview of the platform, and then we'll move quickly into the demonstration of document process intelligence. But anyway, we'll start with the beginning. AltaSoft, a wholly owned subsidiary of Kofax, is the only business intelligence platform that allows organizations to do process intelligence on a platform designed to meet the requirements of mature data discovery solution. The goal is to provide a deeper understanding of how an organization is working to allow themselves to mitigate risk and optimize their business performance. Kofax acquired AltaSoft to complete their smart process application stack. They saw a gap, and they saw a great opportunity to acquire a very successful business intelligence platform to do so. If you don't already know about AltaSoft, or Kofax, our parent company, currently we are traded on the NASDAQ. We have over 20,000 customers, just under $500 million in revenue annually, and are clearly a leader in the first mile space. Let's talk a little bit about some of our customers very briefly. As a global organization, we have the good fortune to count some of the biggest companies on the planet as our customers, as you can see. And I like to say if some of these organizations can standardize on AltaSoft, we believe that you can make that smart decision as well. Let's get into the business intelligence part of it. Let's talk a little bit about the solution that AltaSoft is designed to solve, or the problems we're designed to solve. As we look across our customers, we see a consistent set of recurring themes. These customers are being forced to deal with data that is everywhere across their organization or their enterprise. Internal databases, hosted software as a service applications. How about just data stuck in flat files or Excel files? Even want to point out that we have legacy system data and FTP sites. And of course, these organizations themselves do not make this problem any simpler, due to the fact that most companies are highly distributed, with employees that need and demand access to information in a timely fashion. So I'll pause here to invite anyone on the webinar to type in or send a message if you have any examples or any questions about different data that is in your organization that might be of interest to talk about specifically with us offline, if AltaSoft or how AltaSoft, because the answer is we can, connect to that data for you. So again, please feel free to type in and send any comments at this point. We'll make sure to address them either at the end of the webinar or at the next afterwards. So let's talk about some real-world examples that arise from this complexity. I think we can all agree that there's familiarity to tracking adherence to best practices. And these best practices can relate to processes as diverse as something maybe called quote-to-cash. Hopefully you're familiar with the quote-to-cash process. It's where an organization needs to track every step that underlies the order management and fulfillment. This also relates to a procurement process and other operational practices, but it's a very complex process with many steps that are required to complete it. Another number of our clients are concerned with monitoring both their and their vendors' compliance with service level agreements. Many organizations want to understand not only the want to understand the service level agreements related to external relationships, but also related to servicing their internal customers. Over the last 5 years, a major driver has emerged related to the ability to be able to more effectively monitor compliance. And that's something that our business intelligence platform can provide. Let's talk a little bit about what it takes, though, to conduct business intelligence today. If you'll look at the bottom left of the screen, you'll see that these icons are representative of the vast amounts of data or data sources that occur across your enterprise. To get at that data, you need to do the process of ETL. You need to plug into that data source. You need to extract that data because it's in an application layer that's not optimized for reporting today. Then once you extract it, likely that data needs some type of cleansing or transformation. Afterwards, you would do a loading process. You would load it into secondary repository, optimized for querying and reporting. Well, these first steps, complicated as they are also extremely time-consuming. And the first times we do this, it's a heavy load on the IT department to conduct this ETL and data warehousing just so that we can simply get access to our data. That takes a multitude of different specific skill sets. It takes a multitude of different tools that are being asked to work together. And 9 out of 10 times we find from our existing customer base, the data is not yet in a form that ultimately answers the needs of the business. So the business then has to do additional ETL. If you follow going up, we now have that more ETL or extraction scripts. This could be something as simple as extracting this data into Microsoft Excel. But either way, you're doing additional ETL process and more data cleansing. So what we see from this slide is that a traditional business intelligence implementation is fairly kludgy, it's fairly complex, requires a lot of different moving parts, and a very coordinated effort. Thus, very complicated, timely, and costly to move forward to. I point this out because with the AltoSoft platform, you can now easily access and analyze all of the data you need in real time, on demand, using highly personalized and customizable dashboards, which we're going to go into. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the AltoSoft platform just at a very high level before we move into the demo so we can understand. Following from the left-hand side, again, we want to point out the AltoSoft platform can connect to any data across your enterprise. We bring that data via our analytics server. We do an akin to an ETL process whereby we extract that data, allow you to do transformations or cleansing, and then load it into an open source MART or repository. From that point, you've now done governed data discovery. You've connected to data, you brought data into a MART, and now you have a multitude of different options how you're going to distribute that data to the enterprise. Some examples are distributing it via the dashboard where we build one very large dashboard, and based on permissions, we would distribute that data out to the enterprise whereby everyone could go to one dashboard but only be allowed to see the data that they have permission to see. Very powerful. Important to point out that the way the AltoSoft platform displays the dashboards or data is in a browser-compliant, mobile-compliant mode. No matter whether you're on a PC or Macintosh, Android, Google, or iPhone, as long as you have the ability to view HTML5, you have the full access to the complete, robust capabilities of the AltoSoft platform. I want to get to the demo, so at this point we'll say that if you would like to know more about our platform in the future, we can definitely go into grave detail and really talk about some of the nuance and specificity. But I think it's more important for us to get to the demo. So Matt, would you like to take over?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So what we're going to do here is just take a bit of a dive into what we've done with document processes. And the key thing behind that is how we apply the AltoSoft platform to our document process landscape. So I want to just kind of give us a bit of a feel for that first of all. And just to return back to some of the points Andrew mentioned previously, almost all of those processes that we mentioned, certainly quote to cash, procure to pay, any kind of employee or customer onboarding, relies very much on documents. And those documents traditionally would have been paper. More and more we're seeing more electronic documents. And we have within Kofax and of course the solutions from ImageSource the ability to automate those processes. So we can start to reduce the amount of manual effort required to process these transactional documents through our organizations. So in terms of the automation and the technology, From a technological perspective, of course, we have Kofax Capture, transformation modules, total agility. Those are the pieces of the puzzle that come from the Kofax stable. But of course, we're very conscious that we have much more than just those pieces of technology in our document processes. They're merely just 2 or 3 steps of a much larger process, and they often contain other pieces of technology from other vendors, and of course put together by system integrators and partners such as ImageSource to be able to address a specific document process. The challenge we have here is that each of these technologies either has their own reporting solution or has some kind of reporting or analytics capability, but only looking at their own data. And this is the key thing about document process intelligence, is that we're not just gathering together the data from these disparate places and putting them in one place. We're actually putting it back in context to the process itself. And that's where process intelligence comes in, which is a feature of the AltoSoft platform. So think about our typical document lifecycle. The document arrives via a mailbag or an envelope, maybe through an email or a fax machine, some kind of electronic interface. It ends up going through Kofax Capture, maybe transformation modules. It goes into a BPM workflow. In some cases, that might be total agility, but in other cases, it could be something completely different. We workflow that image around the business. We store it in a content management solution. We put the physical document into some kind of long-term storage, or maybe we shred the documents. And finally, we put all of the data that we've captured into our ERP or our system of record, our finance system, our HR system, whatever it might be. So when it comes to analytics, it's so important to look across the whole life cycle more so than just those couple of pieces there that we've got highlighted in green. And we'll come back to why they're highlighted in green in a second. So let's look at our document process from a graphical perspective. We have our systems of engagement on the left-hand side. It's either pieces of paper, it's faxes, it's digital documents, portals, emails, whatever it might be. We have our systems of record. This is where these documents and the data from them need to end up. Now, traditionally, that, of course, is a manual process, and using Kofax and various other technologies, we automate the process of extracting that data, extracting the documents, and organizing them accordingly and adding value to that process. So that's what our typical document process would look like. When it comes to analytics of that process, we have already some out-of-the-box solutions, and we're going to talk a little bit about these when we go through, around the Kofax technologies. So Kofax Capture and Kofax Total Agility, we have some out-of-the-box, pre-prepared, ready-to-go analytics for those pieces of the puzzle. But of course, what we're talking about here is much wider than that, and doing analytics across the full document lifecycle. So what we're going to show you in the demonstration is some examples of the pre-built content and also some examples of where we would extend this past the capture element of the process into these other parts where it might be receipt of the documents or all the way through to the system of record and those various steps in between. So what we're looking at on screen here is an example of the user experience, and I'm kind of choosing my words carefully here. We have a lot of pre-built content around the capture world. Of course, every customer is different when it comes to the other technologies in their document processes. So what we would look to do is start with the pre-built content within the capture piece and then expand that into those other pieces of technologies that you may or may not use. So what we're seeing here, as I said, is an example of this in action, and this is using some of the technology and some of the systems that we have available to us, and just to give you a feel for what this could look like. So what we're seeing here is our dashboard, and this is what a user would see on a day-to-day basis. This is how they would interact with the results of all of this analytics and business intelligence. The way that the system works is based on something called metrics, and a metric is something that you want to measure. Now, in its very simplest terms, it could be something as simple as number of documents we've processed today, purely just a count of something. So our count of documents processed today is 1,254. But actually, what we might want is some further context to that, not just a count or a sum or an average. Actually give me some more information. And all of these metrics have something called dimensions, and a dimension adds extra context to that metric. So it might be document count daily, just gives us that one number, but we might want to be able to drill through that and say, well, tell me the number of documents daily, but actually tell me the number of documents we processed for this customer or for this department or using this process or using this document type. So dimensions are key to all of these metrics as well, and that will become a bit clearer when we go through the demonstration. So just to talk through some examples here, we have over here on the right-hand side our workflow volume. So what's the volume of documents traveling through our entire process? One thing I should say here is we're obviously looking at the entire process. We're getting data from all of these different multiple systems and actually gathering those together in one place. So what this is telling me is just simply the count of documents at each different time of the day, and that's pretty straightforward. But you'll notice here that these colors now represent one of these dimensions. So it's starting to tell me, well, not only what the volume was at the different times of the day, but how many of those documents are going into each process. And this is key because this allows me to start to understand the trending and the patterns of my systems and also their usage. We could probably guess that, the documents arrive first thing in the morning in the mail and we scan them, so therefore the scan module is going to be busy in the morning and maybe validation later on and then our workflow in the afternoon. We could probably guess that based on just common sense and general knowledge, but we want to remove that guesswork. We want to give you real statistics, accurate statistics, to allow you to staff your operation accordingly. So we know roughly at what time of the day we can start to move our staff over from one to another. We can hit our peak times and start to understand, well, when do we need to shift people from scanning into validation, from validation into workflow. Just moving further down here, we have our mailbag count. So one thing we're going to talk about here is the receipt of documents. So the incoming mail, where are they coming from, which couriers, what type of volume do we have? But where it gets quite interesting, and I want to point out a key feature here, this one over here is queue times by activity. So this starts to tell me how long documents are having to wait before they're processed through each of these different places. Now again, bear in mind, we're looking across these multiple technologies here. Sometimes it might be the mailbag opening and then scanning and capture and then our workflow and then our final archive. Each of these steps in the process we're monitoring individually. Now what this is telling me, as I said, is the amount of time documents are having to wait to be processed. And what you can pretty much see here very clearly from our colors is that we've set some thresholds here to be able to say, well, I want to be warned, I want to be told when we're not hitting the levels of service that we require. I want to know when it takes longer than 30 seconds wait time for a document to be processed through any of these modules. You can see here it's only our mailbag opening area that's actually doing this at the moment. It's just below 30 seconds. We then have these next ones here marked in orange because this is a bit of a warning. This is saying, hey, it's above 30 seconds, but it's not quite reached that minute break that I think is a real problem. So I've set a threshold there to be 60 seconds or less, but above 30 seconds, that's my warning area. This tells me that something might be happening in the future. I can start to identify this bottleneck before it happens. And then, of course, as you can see further up here, we've got a couple of these parts of the solution that really aren't running at an acceptable rate at all. And this gives me some actionable information. I can see very clearly that with validation, I need to get some people in there. So I need to get some people in there. There's not enough people processing these documents. The documents are having to wait too long. And the purpose behind this is to talk through the concept, first of all, of thresholds, as you've understood here, to change these colors and give me that visual warning, but also alerting. So what we can do is proactively alert you to say, hey, it's breached 30 seconds. It's not quite a problem yet. It's not reached that minute threshold that we've got up here, but you should probably start to do something about it. And this is what we're talking about with being kind of near real-time and proactive alerting based on your actual operation. Rather than telling you had a bottleneck on Tuesday morning, telling you on Friday afternoon when a report runs, we want to be told straight away. And in some cases, be told before that bottleneck even happens, so we can make an operational decision to make sure that doesn't get any worse. And that's one of the key messages around the whole of this solution, is to give you that near real-time view of that data. So we're telling you straight away exactly what's happening in your operation right now. We're not having to wait for a report to be run at the end of the day or the end of the week to tell me that we had a problem earlier on in the day.
We don't have the business process flow software.
What we have here, if we just move over into other parts of the solution, is that we have different pieces of technology that make up our document process. So what we're looking at here is an overview summary of these different places, but let's break them down into their individual components. So you'll see this menu across the top here. What we actually have the ability to browse through that, and we can start to move into our other dashboard areas. So what I'm looking at here is the receipting of the system, the receipting of the documents. This could be whether it's incoming electronic documents. In my case, it's all of the paperwork that's coming into the system. So what this allows me to do is start to understand, well, who's our top couriers, who's processing the envelopes and the mail bags from each courier, which region are they coming into, maybe which office, and so on and so forth. So this starts to give me statistics and analytics about the document pre-process area. How are we receiving our documents? How quickly? Who are our top operators? Who are our top customers? Who are our top suppliers? And this starts to give me that view. Now, bear in mind, we haven't done anything with the documents yet. We've purely just receipted them maybe into a database or a spreadsheet that says, we received 62 mail bags today, and most of them came from UPS. So this gives me that initial level of statistics. Now imagine our document process. We've captured the information about the mailbag, we've opened the mailbag itself, and we've now got these pieces of paper in our hand ready to scan. So we move into our document capture world, and what that allows me to do then is to obviously scan the documents and extract the data. So what we want to do is now understand the performance of that part of the system. And that's where I'm going to move into my document capture menu, and we're going to see a couple of different examples here. Now, the document capture menu, you'll see here we've got a whole host of different items that we can look at. We haven't got time to go through them all today, but this is just to give you the picture. This is all pre-built for Kofax capture and transformation modules. So this is the pre-built content that I was speaking about earlier on. Because, of course, we know Kofax capture and transformation very well, we're able to pre-build a lot of the analytics ready to go and ship very quickly. So all of this stuff actually comes out of the box. So to give you an idea of the types of areas that we're monitoring, we look at three key areas. The first area is our operations, the second area is our labor, our people, and the third area is our technology. So I'm going to show you some examples of each of those. So I'm going to go first of all to our trending and statistics page, and this gives me some information purely about our document capture part of the process. So this is telling me the average queue count by module, batches by day of the week, batches by hour of the day. It really gives me that operational view of how our capture process is running. If I go to my breakdowns view here, what this gives me is my view of what's happening right now. So the difference between the two, one was historical and trending, this one is what's happening at the moment. So this could be 35 or 36 documents or batches currently in the system right at the moment, and how those are broken down across their origin, so where they've come from, their status within the system, so whether they're ready to be processed or whether they're in error or they're suspended or whatever it might be. Of course, which batch class they've been scanned into, and those of you that use Kofax Capture will know all about batch classes, and also the priority as well. So that little priority field within Batch Manager where you're able to set the priority, how are our batches split down across those different priorities. Now, the reason for showing you this is to also just take a bit of a tangent into one of the other features of the dashboard. And this speaks a little bit to what Andrew mentioned earlier on around governed data discovery. So you might give this dashboard to 20 people, and then the 21st person comes along and says, hey, this is kind of interesting, but I'm not really happy with the way this looks. I want some different information in this report or in this view. So what you would typically do is go back to your report writing team or back to your IT department and say, hey, can we write this report for this guy, he thinks he's special and wants this report just for him. So that takes a few days of effort, and eventually we get that new report. Well, actually what we want to do is remove that lag time and remove that effort and give that decision back over to the end user to say, hey, if you want this to be a little bit different, then you go ahead. You play around with this data. You do this yourself. And this is what data discovery really means, data liberation. So how does that look in the software? Well, if I right-click on this chart, it brings me up a menu of various different things that I can do. And we won't have time to go through all of these, but there's various things. I can change the chart type, I can change the sorting options and those kind of simple things. But what I want to do is just show you this one here called pivoting. And this, if I just open it up, this allows me to actually interact with all of the other dimensions of this metric. So you remember I mentioned dimensions earlier on. Currently what we're looking at is the number of batches split down by their priority. Well, that's kind of interesting, but I might want to know not only the priority, but also maybe the batch class that these came from. So I want to drag that into my bars. I can just drop it there. and that automatically then pivots that table to look at the data slightly differently. And say, okay, well, batch class is kind of interesting, but let's drop that out, and let's now go for module name instead. And I can see the priorities then split down by each of the modules that they're currently in. And that's a very simple example, but if I zoom back out here, you'll notice that the dashboard has maintained that change. It's maintained that pivot for me. So I've got various other options and other things I can do. So what if I've pivoted in a little bit too much information? Maybe we've got 100 of these different dimension values here. What I can do is maybe if that's become a little bit clumsy or a little bit difficult to read, I can switch that to be a metrics grid. So I can simply switch that straight over, and now I have a tabular view on that same data. From here, I can also export it. So I could take it out to Excel if I wanted to, or also some formatted and unformatted different file types. And this is really important because I can take the data out of the system if I want to. What else can I do? Well, I can investigate these 9 that are in error. So let me give you that as an example. Let's click on that portion of the pie chart, and that's going to now tell me, well, of those 9, tell me what batch class they're currently in. So I can drill again through these dimensions, tell me the batch class. So what I'm going to do is just click OK, and that's going to tell me then that we've got 6 of those errors were in invoices, 3 of them were in mobile receipts. And I could drill through again and go further and further through. But this is to give you an idea that this now looks completely different to the way the dashboard first started when we came in. And that's because as an end user, I've been able to make these changes myself. Of course, we're not changing it for the other users. They're kept exactly the same, but they've got the option to do all of this drill down as well. Now, what someone might do is actually invest quite a lot of time in getting this data to be just perfect for them. So they've done their slice and dice, they've drilled through, they've changed the chart type, or they've switched it to be a metrics grid. They might want to come back to that every single time. They don't want to come back to that original view. So what they can do is actually bookmark their design and come back to it at a later date. And this means that I can make the changes once, come back to it later on. I can bookmark it to my browser. But more importantly, I can send and share that dashboard with other people. So we can start to get to that kind of collaboration phase where we're saying, hey guys, look what I've just found. I've just drilled through this data, and on Thursday afternoon, we've got this particular trend within our operation. I think we need to do something about it. Take a look at the data yourself. I'm going to send you a link. And that becomes makes this a real collaboration piece. And rather than just being a report that you print out and bring to a meeting, it's actually something that you kind of live by day, and gives you that real-time view of what's going on in the operation. So that's an example of some of the interactivity. I'm just going to take us through some of the further screens, and then we'll kind of finish off on the final piece there. So that's some interesting stuff around our operations, what's actually going on in the capture operation itself. If we look at our labor, we can start to understand how our team are performing. So how much time it's taking them to do certain activities. What are their patterns? Do they start slacking off on Friday afternoons at 3 o'clock? Well, maybe we need to keep an eye on that. And also how we can compare them to one another, so we can benchmark our operators against the rest of the group. So I can see very quickly and clearly here how Simon is performing with invoices and mobile receipts. We can quickly see that with mobile receipts, he's below average, he's doing really well, but he's way above average on invoices. Well, that's probably not his fault. He maybe just needs some training or some guidance or a bit of instruction on how to use the invoice batch class. So this really quickly identifies areas for improvement, and really low-level areas as well. Where is Simon doing really well? Where does he need some extra improvement, and where does he need some training? So it's that type of thing that we hold within the analytics portion. Finally, of course, we have information about the technology. So not only the people, but how is our technology performing? What's our field level statistics? How well are we extracting? What are our extraction rates? What's our change ratio? How many fields are we extracting? How many are we having to change? And it's this type of technological performance along with the labor performance and also the operations that really give us that deep and rich view on our capture world. So analytics for capture is built into this whole thing. What you actually get, as I said, is a lot of pre-built content. We've got loads and loads to show you, but we haven't got time today. Please, of course, let us know if you want to know any more details about that. But the key thing we're talking about today isn't just the capture technology. We're talking about the whole piece, all of the technology that makes up our document process. So moving on, we can look at things around our workflow. So we've exported the documents. Invoice, it's now going through approval, and we want to understand, how we're approving them, which region are approving the most or the least, how many rejections we're having, who are the operators that are doing the different activities. All of the different types of things you'd expect coming from your workflow part of the technology. Now, finally, once we've done the workflow, we're going to be archiving the documents. So we've got a couple of different archives here, and again, this is just an example using some of the customers that we've worked with before. Of course, a digital archive is key, because if we're scanning these documents, we need to put them somewhere. So we have some statistics around our digital archive. This could be our content management system. And the key thing we always find with those is around usage. So who's using how much space is being used, how many retrievals we have every week. And this allows me to start to understand the details of how the system is being used, but also potentially for charging back as well. So we have some customers that use screens like this to be able to say, hey, the accounting team, they use 25% more than the customer care team, therefore they should pay that little bit more as part of our internal accounting when it comes to actually paying for this system and its maintenance. So that chargeback is a very typical use for this type of thing. But that's our digital archive. Well, what about our physical archive? And we know a lot of customers use either a third-party provider to take the documents away, maybe shred them, or even store them internally if you've got some space within your organization. And of course, all of those types of solutions, whether they're internal or external, generally run on some kind of database, because we need to be able to retrieve these hard copies if we need to get to them in the future. So we can attach to that database using the tool and start to bring out all of the information you can see. Total number of documents in storage, number of retrievals this week. Of course, with physical retrievals, we have a cost associated with that. So we can see pretty clearly that we've had a pretty expensive week this week, and maybe I want to start to figure out exactly what's going on. Well, what we've got on the right-hand side is a list of all of our documents in the store. I can simply sort by retrievals, and this tells me a pretty grim story. Unfortunately, these two documents here have been retrieved a whole host of times, way, way more than we would like. And you can see here we've used that thresholding and the color coding to identify that these have gone far too far. So if we're retrieving these from the physical store, why is that? We've got them as an electronic image. Well, why are we having to go back so often to get the physical copy? Well, let's take a look at the image itself. So we can actually link out to the place that these documents are stored, and we can generate that link, and we can go and actually view that document. So we can put a call out to that system and say, bring me back this document, I want to know what it is. And you can see very clearly, this is exactly why we're retrieving this document so many times. It was a poor quality scan, it went through the system, it wasn't spotted. So what we need to do is probably retrieve it one last time and then scan it properly. And this allows me to identify that, rather than just kind of living in that world of thinking, oh, well, I'm just going to have to go and retrieve it every time. I can actually do something about it. And of course, it wouldn't really get to this level, because we would have sent you an alert at, 25 retrievals or whatever the maximum might be that you'd want to set, and you'd then be alerted to that. But it's just to paint that picture of that's the type of thing we can do. Just back to our process overview here, and I'm going to kind of finish up here with the final piece of the puzzle. What we've seen so far across these different screens is how these different pieces of technology can be attached to. We can gather the data from those systems. We can present it in a dashboard. That's all fairly straightforward stuff, and we can give you some interesting statistics. But what we haven't seen so far is the culmination of all of those technologies and all of those statistics in one place and in context to the process itself. And that's where process intelligence comes in, and this is a key part of the AltoSoft platform. So I'm going to go into my process chart here, and what that's going to do is actually give me that cradle-to-grave view. Every single step across the entire process is now presented to me on one single screen with the corresponding statistics. And this is unique to the AltoSoft platform. There are no other BI tools out there that can give you this process view of all of those different technologies all in one place. So what we're actually looking at here, if we go through our process again, we've got our mailbag receipting system here. That's this step. We've then got capture, extraction, validation, export, QC. Those are very typical Kofax steps that we're seeing our documents flow through. We've then got matching, approval, and rejection. That's all to do with our workflow. We've then got our archive and then our storage area, and also we're tapping into our ERP system to make sure these documents are actually paid. So let's say they're invoices here as an example. So what this gives me is the ability to reconstruct the path that these documents are following through the process, not just give you an out-of-context bar chart that says, hey, on average, we're taking 27 minutes to process a document. We're actually viewing the real statistics and the real path that these documents are following. And the reason that's important is that allows me to start to spot compliance, risk, and possibly even fraud issues as well. Because to explain what these numbers are, where you see a number on a green line here, that's the number of documents that have traveled the correct path. So 3,780 documents traveled from export into our BPM system that did our matching. That's great. You know, that's the number of documents that have traveled the correct path. But what you'll notice here is we've got a number in the top left and also a number in the bottom right. And this is where it's kind of telling us we may have some issues, because that number tells me up here in the top left the number of documents that went into matching from somewhere else other than export. But that's not how our system should run, so that's not right, so we need to look into that. And then 12 documents left matching to go to somewhere else other than approval or rejection. And again, that's not right either. So I can already start to spot that I've got maybe some issues within my process. Something's going on. Somebody's skipping some steps or missing steps or repeating steps, and I want to try and figure out what's going on. So I can actually click through onto this node, put that right at the center of my world, and start to understand, well, 3,780, that's the path that it should follow. That's great. 264 came from approval. We could maybe understand that. Maybe they went through the wrong path in the BPM and they were sent back to matching. Okay, I kind of get that. That might work. But where we've got a real problem is this one here. 120 documents went straight to matching from mailbag received. So that tells me we receipted the documents, we completely bypassed the whole scanning process, and they've been manually entered into matching. Well, that's not right at all. So what we can do is actually drill in. We can click on that number 120 and start to understand, well, which documents were they? Which operators? What time did it happen? You know, who's actually performing these activities? I can click on one of these and start to see what steps have happened before and after this document has come into matching. And this is what process intelligence is all about. It gives me this process-driven view on my document process system that I'm running. And again, the key thing here, across multiple technologies, scanning, capture, storage, workflow, final archive, all of those things all in one single place. And let me give you just a final view here before I hand back to Cass just to finish off. We can do a couple more things. We can right-click here and we can do a process filter. I can go and look for a specific circumstance. I can say, well, tell me all of the finished documents, so all of the ones that have finished the process, not the ongoing ones, you know, they may well end up in the right place eventually. Tell me the finished ones where we've got the step existing of paid in the ERP, but we're missing the step of approval. Well, that actually gives me a really interesting scenario, because that means I've paid the invoice, but we didn't approve it in our workflow. That's two separate systems that we're trying to glue together here and trying to understand what's going on. So let's take a look at that, click OK, and of course, oh gosh, we've got 840 documents where that exact scenario happened. And this is where, again, process intelligence gives us the view on compliance of the process steps, not just this out-of-context business intelligence view of charts and graphs and grids, but actually putting that back into context of the process to tell me we had 840 instances where this happened, where this didn't happen, and that's a problem. And if we're looking to keep our CFO out of jail, we need to make sure that we're processing these documents correctly and we are taking them through the different steps. That being said, if that gives us the view of what should happen, and we've obviously identified things where it's not happening correctly, what is actually happening with these documents? Well, let's take a look at our swim lane view. And what this is going to do is show me all of the different combinations of steps that these documents are taking. So we can see very clearly 32% are following the right path. So all the way through the different steps, everything's green, all the way down to paying in the ERP, and then finally.
Why are we?
But if that's only 32%, you know, what the heck's happening to the other 68? Well, what we can see here is the breakdown of those other documents, exactly what's happening, the different steps in the processes that are occurring. This is that 840 I just identified. So if we scroll down here, we can see that 840, 12.5%, actually came all the way from matching through to rejection. That's okay. You know, you can reject documents if you want to. But we can see very clearly with this red arrow, they actually went back up to being paid in the ERP. And we can see, again, if we drill through here, we can take a view on which documents they actually were, who's been performing those activities, who's actually approving these invoices when they shouldn't be, and so on and so forth. And we can see across the rest of the chart here all of the different combinations of steps that have happened. So one final example, 576, where we received them into the mailbag system, but we completely skipped everything else, and they ended up in final archive. So 576 documents that we received in the organization, we didn't bother doing anything at all with them apart from putting them into our final archive system. Well, again, we want to know what's going on there. And that's the final piece, really. When it comes to document process intelligence, it's more than just reporting. It's more than just analytics. It's more than just traditional business intelligence. It gives us a view on the process that allows me to reconstruct the path of every single document that's traveled through every single environment, every single system that makes up our full document lifecycle, whether that's receipt of documents, capture of the documents and data, through workflow, through an ECM system, through a content management system, and finally into our ERP and then into our final archives. We can piece together this puzzle to give you a full cradle-to-grave view, a full audit trail of every single document, and then the statistics around that. Tell me the number and the percent and the average and the median and the mean and the max of these different scenarios. And that's where the AltoSoft platform really comes into its own, wrapping around these full document processes that are provided to you from image source. So that brings me to the end of the presentation.
So first question, guys, either one of you can answer this, is we don't use Total Agility as a workflow solution. Can I still use AltoSoft?
Yeah, great question. AltoSoft, obviously, because it's related to an acquisition of Kofax, whilst we have pre-built solutions for Total Agility and Capture, we're not dependent on those technologies at all. We're completely agnostic to any technology within the document process space, or indeed any technology that you want to attach to. We have no limitations on that at all. We simply just connect at the database level, extract the data that we need, and then we do the rest ourselves. So we're completely agnostic to any workflow.
Great. And the next one that came in is, how is this different than Kofax Analytics for Capture?
Great question, and that really kind of flows on from the last question, which is Kofax Analytics for Capture is specifically around the capture part of this technology. So as we've seen in some of the slides in the demonstration, Kofax Capture makes up, steps 2, 3, and 4 of a 10-step process. But what happened before, what happened afterwards, they happen in other technologies. So Kofax Analytics for Capture gives us a fantastic view into that capture world, but what we're looking at here is an extension of that, going before, going after, gathering the data from those other technologies that make up our full process and bringing those all into one place.
Okay, and then the next one is, we use a homegrown ECM system. Can this connect to that, and how will it connect?
Okay, yeah, great question. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a branded system. It doesn't have to be an industry system. If you've got your own system, that's absolutely fine. As I said, we connect at the database level, so we don't need to have APIs or write any code or have access to anything like that. We simply connect at the database level, and that makes us very agnostic, again, across these technologies. So we don't have to be certified to connect to certain types of systems. We connect at the database level, and that's generally some kind of ODBC compliant database, SQL, Oracle, DB2, whatever it might be. And that makes it really easy for us to connect, grab all of that data without having to get into complex integrations. We can use industry standard connectors when it comes to the databases and grab the data we need. So using a homegrown system wouldn't be of a concern to us.